Good day, everyone. Today, we're going to dive into a fascinating case study that brings together the field of volcanology, geochemistry, and hazard science, focusing on the explosive eruption of Barika volcano in Ethiopia around 87,000 years ago. So this isn't just an irregular eruption, it is a pure alkaline rhyolite volcano, which means its magma has an unusual chemistry very different from what we usually see in subduction zone volcanism, like in the Philippines. So we're talking about magmas that are extremely rich in alkalis, like sodium and potassium, and have relatively low viscosity compared to other rhyolitic magmas. So in this presentation, I'll walk you through the eruption sequence, the deposit features, and the physical processes behind the eruption, and what this means for volcanic hazard assessment in reef zones like the main Ethiopian reef. So now you might be wondering, why should we study about peralkaline rhyolites? So well, first of all, they are rare. They only occur in very specific tectonic environments, usually in continental reef zones like the main Ethiopian reef or place like Pantelleria in Italy. So because they are rare and unpredictable, we don't have many direct observation of their eruption. In fact, none of the large explosive eruption of peralkaline rhyolites have ever been witnessed in modern times. And these magma are incredibly volatile rich, meaning they contain a lot of gases like water vapor, fluorine, and chlorine. So at the same time, their chemistry makes them less viscous than typical rhyolites, which can drastically influence how they erupt. Are they going to explode violently? Are they going to flow like lava? Or maybe alternate between both? So this study focuses on a particularly well-preserved eruption at Barika volcano, dated at 87,000 years ago, and their goal is to better understand how peralkaline magmas behave during explosive eruptions, and this has big implication for hazard forecasting in areas like East Africa. So this slide shows us where Barika is located. It lies within the Bora Barika Tulumoy volcanic complex in the central main Ethiopian reef. So as you can see in the picture, this area is cut by major reef fault, and there are numerous silicic volcanic centers distributed along it. And Barika is just one of them, but it has a very distinct eruptive history. So what makes this region geologically interesting is that it's a site of continental extension. So Africa is literally being pulled apart here. That's why we see volcanic activity concentrated along the reef axis. And this kind of environmental creates favorable condition for the generation of peralkaline magmas due to prolonged crustal melting and the accumulation of volatiles. So when the volcanologists study past eruptions, we often rely on the layers left behind in this field. So this slide shows the stratigraphy from two sites, MER 147 and 205, which are 3.5 and 4.5 kilometers away from the Barika vent respectively. So now, what's really exciting here is that the Barika eruption occurred in the three main phases. So phase 1 is the bottom layer, a well-sorted massive pumice fault deposit. It represents a sustained Plinian eruption column that reached very high altitudes, possibly 25 to 30 kilometers. And the phase 2, the middle section, is different. It's bedded with a lot of lithic fragments and contains pyroclastic density current deposit, and tell us the eruption became unstable and the column started collapsing and produced ground hugging flows. And the phase 3, the top layer, is another Plinian fall, very similar to phase 1, so the eruption stabilized again before it ended. So these three phases sequence shows us the eruption dynamics change over time from sustained to unsteady, then back to sustained again. For the methodology, let's talk about how this study was conducted. So researchers collected over 6 kilograms of pepper samples from the three distinct stratigraphic levels at site MER 147, and each representing one of the eruption phases. They use a technique called channel sampling to make sure they capture the vertical variation along the deposit. So the grain size analysis, component tree studies, and vesicles texture analysis were all done to understand how the eruption evolved. And by looking at pumice vesicularity, grain sorting, and bubble number densities, we can reconstruct the pressure, temperature, magma ascent rates during the eruption, and like it's reading diary written in a ash and pumice. So here's where things get interesting. These figures show the grain size distribution and the component makeup of each layer. Across all phases, pumice dominates the deposit, but we can see the most latex and crystal in phase 2. That's a big clue. Lithics came from the vent walls or conduits, so their presence suggests the vent was widening or collapsing, making the eruption more chaotic. And the sorting of grains also varies. Phase 1 and 3 are well sorted, which matches the idea of a sustained plume, and phase 2 is poorly sorted, supporting the interpretation of column collapse and PDC formation. This kind of granular forensic work is essential for reconstructing eruption styles. And let's take a closer look at the pumice. So through microscopy, we can see that the vesicles or gas bubbles inside pumice vary by size, shape, and connectivity. Low density pumice has large and well connected bubbles, and these suggest that the magma had time to expand and the gas before fragmenting. In contrast, dense pumice from the middle layer has small, poorly connected vesicles, and it is an evidence of rapid fragmentation under high pressure. We also see microfractures and different bubbles, wall thicknesses indicating various strain rates inside the conduit. The presence of two pumice elongated bubbles tells us about shearing near the conduit walls, and these tiny features provide a big picture view of what was happening underground. Using the vesicle numbers, the bubble size data, scientists calculated decompression rates using Toromaro's equation. They found that the decompression was fastest during phase 1 and 3, around 3 to 5.6 megapascal per second, and it is typical of explosive Plinian eruption. But during phase 2, decompression slowed down. Why? It is because the vent had widened and the system was losing gas more efficiently, leading to lower pressure and column instability. So this fluctuation is the compression rate and a key indicator of changing eruption styles and reflect what's happening in the magma conduit, sometimes accelerating and sometimes slowing. It is driven by pressure, gas content, and conduit geometry. So now that we've looked at the physical and textural evidence from the deposit, let's piece everything together into integrated eruption dynamic model. So this slide synthesizes the entire eruption sequence into a three-phase conceptual model that highlights how internal magmatic processes and conduit conditions govern the observed eruptive behavior. So we have the phase 1, the sustained explosive plume, and this initial phase deposit a massive, well-sorted pumice fall, and its textural features are high vesicularity and microlite-free pumice suggest the rapid magma ascent and high decompression rates up to 5.6 megapascal per second for moderate density class. And the magma was rich in volatiles, stars at approximately 100 megapascal and rose through a narrow conduit, generating a Plinian-style plume at 10 to 30-kilometer high. And its bubble texture is moderate vesicle elongation and regular shapes reflect controlled continuous nucleation with moderate coalescence. So phase 2, unsteady behavior and column collapse, and the middle horizon shows bedded tephra and PDC deposit, indicative of a unsteady eruptive column that intermittently collapsed, and this change was linked to a drop in decompression rates down to 2.4 megapascal per second. And this vent widening supported by a spike in lithic content up to 17%. And it is possible changes in plume-based geometry, reducing air entrainment and causing column instability. So component 3 analysis and the increased lithic load imply mechanical erosion of the conduit walls, increasing the bulk density of the eruptive mixing and promoting collapse. So the phase 3, it's rejuvenated sustained plume also. The final phase again produced a massive pumice ball similar in appearance inserting to phase 1. However, subtle chemical and mineralogical differences were noted, like the slight increase in magnesium, calcium, and aluminum in ignematite and amphibole crystals. It suggests that the intrusion of a hotter and slightly more mafic magma before a during the eruption. And this fresh magma likely reinvigorated volatile supply, increased pressure, and re-established a sustained eruptive column. And the decompression rates increased again up to 5.6 megapascal per seconds, and enhanced vesicles connectivity indicates efficient degassing and a prolonged to eruption waning. So now let's talk about something very important, the volcanic hazards and why this case study of Barica is not just interesting for scientists but critical for public safety and hazard planning. So let's start by understanding the basic hazard types revealed by the Barica deposits. So eruption column of that height can inject ash into a stratosphere causing long-distance ashfall, widespread air quality hazards, and disruption of aviation, especially if the eruption happens near populated air routes. So even a remote volcano like Barica, which is not near major cities, could have regional or even global effects on air travel and health. Second is the pyroclastic density currents. So PDCs are fast-moving, ground-hugging clouds of hot gas, ash, and volcanic fragments that can travel at speeds of over 100 kilometers per hour. In Borica's case, this flow left behind thick, poorly sorted deposits, some reaching over a meter in thickness. So what makes it more complex is that the transition from a steady plume to PVC forming collapse can happen suddenly. Third is the sudden change in eruption style. So here's what happened. The eruption begins explosively, forming a plinian column, then it transitioned to unsteady behavior that produced PDCs and the column collapsed, and then it returned to steady column after a likely magma recharge event. So fourth is the relevance to modern drift volcano. So this isn't just about a volcano in Ethiopia 87 years ago. So the same per alkaline system exists in active populated areas today. So the hazard implication from Barica help us anticipate behavior in modern volcanic system around the world. So to conclude, the Barica eruption provides an excellent case study of how per-alkaline rhyolite eruption behave, and it shows how even a single eruption can have a multiple styles, steady to unsteady, linear and PDC generating. And through detailed field and lab analysis, we gain insights into the deep magmatic processes that control eruption behavior. And most importantly, it highlights the importance of studying ancient eruption to prepare for future ones. So thank you so much for more attention, and I am happy to take your questions. That's all for my presentation. Thank you.